Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm super excited to dive deep into the WE Knives Attor. This is a Dalibor Bergam design, and Dalibor is somebody I've been following for the last 12 years, from the time he first started becoming a knife maker until now. And I found out about him through blade forums way back in the day whenever just got into the knife scene. He is a custom knife maker and he makes watches, which kind of makes sense. He's from Croatia, and there's no doubt he makes functional art. And since his custom knives are way out of my reach, I was super excited to be able to get this one for the channel. So first, let's talk about the specs. We have a pretty large EDC knife coming in at 8.4 inches long. It has a 3.56 inch modified Persian blade of CPM 20CV steel. There's 5 different variations of this knife, but I got to check this one out at Blade Show and I absolutely love the finish. I have a qualm about it, but we'll talk about that later. But they're calling this their polished gray finish, and it kind of has like a gun bluing effect or like a aged, I don't know. It just looks really, really nice and feels really nice as well. And of course, we'll see how it holds up after we finish testing the blade. You don't have any jimps up top, but I don't find it necessary. You have a pretty needle-like tip there, great for piercing, and you have a top swedge for some flare up top. You have a blade hole for deployment, and you can see they even polished a chamfer around the hole. I was kind of worried that would be a little bit difficult to deploy, but it hasn't been an issue at all. Now you have a pretty interesting sharpening notch right there. You can see it cut in. When I first saw that, I was like, why would they do that? Well, you see how this portion right here comes up a little bit? Well, being this is a titanium integral, if you didn't know that already, it's one solid piece of titanium that they milled out from the inside. Being that if you put a stop pin in here, you would have to drill a hole right here, and I'm sure they wanted to look clean, and it's probably to his specs. So this little portion right here, basically where that plunge grind comes down, is acting like a blade kick like you would on a slip joint. So this is the stop, and if you look in there, you can see where it's contacting the tie frame. See that shiny spot in there? So I get it. Not a big deal. You know, I can sharpen it, and then if it ever starts to flare, I could open that up a little bit more. You have a compound ground blade. It's 2 flat grinds, and I'm going to say it's like a faux compound grind. The reason I say that is because this grind is pretty much the same from here to here. The behind the edge thickness on the straight edge portion is around 17 thousandths behind the edge, and it's the exact same all the way up to that tip. Now, you do have somewhat of a transition right there. I mean, it's nothing crazy. And it definitely has that Japanese tanto feel and look, in my opinion. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I'm kind of interested to see how this thing's going to perform. Let's find out. Yeah, I was really excited to test this blade out. It's been a while since I've gotten to test a WE knife. I think it was the WE Nephrus or the Ziphius, one of the two, and they performed outstanding, so I was excited to see how this one performed. Now, of course, this one has a little bit thicker geometry than those two, but it came screaming sharp, and it is blasting through the material. This could be a pretty versatile blade. You got a decent small, you got a small bit of straight edge, so doing these in-hand cuts, you can use that portion. And then you have that belly up there at the front. So it's kind of acting like a tanto in a way. I know they call it a modified Persian, but yeah, that's how it feels. So now we're testing the ergos, and you know, usually with these integrals, they're very, very comfortable. And light pressure and moderate pressure, this one was very comfortable. Now, whenever I really started bearing down, that clip started giving me a hot spot in the middle of my hand. Wasn't terrible, but I could definitely feel it and left a little small indentation. I think it's because of how narrow the scales are, and the clip sits up kind of high. Now, whenever I started the 1/2-inch sisal rope, I wanted to see, I was going to try a portion of the cutting with the front portion of the belly, and then kind of try later to scoot back toward that transition between the straight edge and the belly. And they both work great, and at this time I hadn't checked any of the behind the edge thicknesses, and oddly enough, both bevels are at 17 degrees per side. I thought where that transition would be, I thought that front area was going to be, you know, a good bit thicker, But no, and you know, rubbing my finger across where the little transition line is, you don't feel a hump at all. So it's kind of interesting how they did that. But yeah, no matter if I use the portion by the tip or behind it by that transition, it's performing really, really well. Popping that 1/2 inch sisal rope, pretty much push cutting it. And by the end of this, the edge still felt like it did when I started. So excellent job there. And once again, another one that's performing great. Now you won't be able to use the tip to do drag cuts, obviously, because it's way too high, but I'm going to try to see if I can use that transition area, even though it's not, it's more like a Japanese tanto transition. So we'll see. But I mean, of course, that belly, it'll be easy to do drag cuts with that. It's just the fine precision drag cuts that you won't really be able to make with this one. So if that's what you use your knife for mainly, then this might not be the one for you. See, that's what I'm talking about. I'm using that transition spot and the belly. But everything on the flat cutting surface, outstanding. And it's blasting through all the material so very nicely. So I was really happy with this one, besides the little minor hot spot from the clip, and that was the only one I was bearing down. I think this one did really, really well, comfortable, and it's still screaming sharp at the end of this. So that's all I can really ask for. Now let's get into the deployment. And this thing has gotten buttery smooth the more and more I open and close it. So you have a thumb hole opener. Now you have these stud looking things, but this right here is acting as an external stop pin, as you can see in the open position. And this knife is riding on ceramic ball bearings with a ceramic detent ball, and it reverse flicks really well, thumb flicks well, slow rolls well. And look at that. Butter. It's gotten so smooth. I wish I could feel this. I mean, ridiculous. Now let's close it up and take a look at this beautiful handle. At least in my opinion it is. So you have a very clean look because it's an integral. So all you have is your pivot that shows right there. You have some beautiful contouring, and they softened all the edges around here. Very, very nicely done. It feels so nice to the touch. And you can see where they softened this area. It's kind of distressed right there. And I think it looks so, so cool, especially with this finish. Of course, you have the solid titanium back. You have your standard WE logoed pivot. And then the pivot collar on mine has the lightning anode finish on it. Gives it a little bit of pop of color, but I do think it would have looked awesome with a satin finish on there, or just this bronze. Satin would have, I think, looked really clean, or black. I do think that the closed profile is stunning. Now that's my personal preference at least. Your blade centering is perfect down the pipe. And one thing about an integral, unless that pivot's loose, if your knife isn't centered, good luck trying to get it centered, because you don't have anything you can shift like you would normally do with a normal two-piece construction folder. Now this one has a milled titanium pocket clip that's a mile long. It is tip up right hand carry only. I will say the clip functions excellently because this is smooth and they got a good bit of tension on it. So it slides in there nicely and it holds it in there nicely. And that's what you have sticking out of the pocket, which I'm perfectly fine with. And the way this clip angles like this, it hugs this side of the pocket very well and it pretty much stays there. At least it has in my jeans. And then you got something to grab a hold to when pulling it out, because you definitely don't want to drop an expensive knife like this. Now let's talk about the pocket clip. We're going to get into the ergos real quick. Kind of touched on it during the testing, but being that this handle is pretty skinny back here and it's not super thick, I think it comes in at 0.48 inches thick. So it's under the 1/2 inch average, but initially, you know, grabbing it, super comfortable. And a lot of the cutting, I was choked up right here in this spot. You know, that was just a comfortable spot, and I'm not super far from the edge like it would be back here. Well, when I'm choked up right here, whenever I was really bearing down, the bill of this clip right here was leaving an indentation in my palm. That wasn't terrible, but I could definitely feel it. And it was only when I was really giving it all I had. Now, whenever I grab it back here, I can feel it even more. So it's going to depend on your hand size. And, you know, like I said, it wasn't terrible. I didn't have to stop what I was doing, but I could definitely feel it. And it definitely left a little indentation on me. So something I definitely thought I should mention. Another thing that I noticed, and this was on me because I chose this finish, but they call this a polished gray finish, and I'm sure what they're doing is polishing the scales and the blade somewhat and then putting the finish over it. It feels outstanding. The blade too. The blade is nice and slick feeling, and the scales just melt in the hand. However, there's no texture on the tie, and like I said, it gets skinny right here, so I don't have the best grip on it. It just depends on if my hands are dry or not. I never dropped the knife or anything, but if you're somebody who fidgets all day, or you live in an area where it gets cold or really cold, then you might want to go with another finish. Maybe the black finish. That one looks like it would have the most traction on it. It's definitely one that I'll have to revisit in the wintertime because I could see this getting really, really slippery. But besides those two things, this was super comfortable in all the other cutting. I don't like the look of the clip aesthetically. I'm pretty sure they're following his custom design, but it does function well. If you look on this side, you have a really long lock relief here. At least that clip sits in front of that on this side, so I had no issues with it getting hung up in there. And then you have a bronze anodized Torx head right here, along with this stop pin and this screw. And then the stainless steel lock bar insert is coated black, it looks like. This pivot collar, if you see right here, is also acting as an over travel. And I'm sure this side this is probably the side you have to take apart, to get the bearings and stuff in there. I like how WE does that. I wasn't going to take this one apart. It's running way too smooth. The lockup on my knife is sitting at around 40 to 50% or so. Super tight. No, when I say I can't muscle any movement, and I figured it was going to be super tight because when you have that external stop pin like that, you got the blade being wedged here and here. So when it's locked up, you're not going to have the play because you have this bar on both sides, and that's a pretty nice size bar. And a lot of the hard use pocket knives, you'll see these external stops just so you have that tighter lockup. Another thing that adds to the overall strength of this knife, besides the external stops, is the fact that this is an integral, because one solid piece is definitely going to be more solid than two-part construction that has an opportunity to shift like that. The access to the lock bar is not great. You can see it's flush with the show side scale. They do have the chamfer on both sides like that. It's not terrible, but it definitely could be better. It's, okay to get my finger in there. Using this portion is how I do it every single time, though. It's way easier, way more comfortable. But if you only want to use this portion, you can. It's just way more comfortable using this one for me. Now for some quick size comparisons, we have the WE Knives Praxis and the WE Knives Nephrus. The Praxis is just a hair longer, and the Nephrus is just a hair shorter. Next up, it's pretty much identical in length to the Griffin X Series bolster lock, and it's a little bit longer than the WE Knives Vision R. We have another integral with the Microtech Anax. The Anax is just a hair longer, and then we have the Spyderco Gale Bradley 2, which is pretty much identical in length. And lastly, it's just a little bit shorter than the Ontario Rat 1, and it's a little bit longer than the Spyderco PM2. And I almost forgot, it's the exact same length as the CRK Omnumzon. Being that this is one solid chunk of titanium and it's a pretty large knife, I would think it would add some extra weight. Let's check it out. It's coming in at 134.3 grams or 4.73 ounces, which is not bad at all. All right, now for my nitpicks and complaints. Like I said earlier, the finish is a little slick, but I chose this one and I'd probably choose it again. It looks that good. No lefty love for all the lefties out there. And lastly, I think the only real complaint I have is the pocket clip. I don't like the way it looks, and being that the handle scales are a little bit more narrow and a little thinner, whenever I was pushing down hard into wood, I could feel the tip of that clip. Wasn't terrible, but definitely something I think I needed to mention, because this is not a cheap knife by any means. But the fact that I am a huge Dalibor fan, I don't think the price is too out of hand, especially for a nice full-size knife that is an integral. You have some beautiful finishing, and the action is outstanding. Very unique looking knife. and one that should probably last a lifetime. This version comes in at $374. So like I said, it's not cheap. I get it. It's definitely a premium knife, premium price tag, and you're definitely going to have to love the knife, in my opinion, to pull the trigger, unless you just have tons of disposable income. So who is this knife for? If you're someone looking for a high quality, aesthetically pleasing pocket knife that performs well and is pretty versatile and should also be able to handle some heavier use, the WE Knives Attor is a fantastic option. The combination of its materials, design, smooth action make it a standout piece for anyone's collection. If you've ever looked at Dalibor Bergam's custom pieces and what they go for, yeah, this is the only way I'd be able to have my hands on one. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked it, please drop a thumbs up so I know you enjoy my content. And if you enjoy knife and gear content and you're not already, consider hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to have you join the family. And I'm super interested to hear your thoughts in the comments on this WE Knives Attor. If you're interested in this knife, I will have it linked down in the description. It will be an affiliate link, so if you want to help support what I do here on this channel, which helps me pay for my testing materials, I can't thank y'all guys enough. If not, no big deal at all. Thanks for watching, everyone. And remember, keep them blades sharp, smile more. Peace!